Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar, which actually doesn't have a name, but hosted by Regeneris. And today I am super excited to be introducing the UK audience to Steph Greunke. And to talk about actually the work that she's been doing in the US and to introduce you to the UK audience, Steph, for those that aren't already following the work that you're doing. So Steph is one of the speakers at the Gestational Journey Summit, which we're hosting in October this year. And I'm really excited about the presentation that she's going to be giving. And so today is just kind of a precursor to that. So Steph is the mum to two energetic little boys who are both toddlers, I think. Mm-hmm. There is no sound, we're being told. Okay. Lauren, are you there?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Somebody else can hear you.
Okay, somebody else has just chipped in to say they can hear. Thank you very much, Tasha. So I think we appear to be good to go. Okay, so mum to two energetic toddler boys. Steph is a registered dietitian and she has a bachelor's and a master's degree. And forgive me for just lumping all of these together because you've got a lot of qualifications. So bachelor's and master's degrees in human biology, psychology, nutrition and health promotion. And then you've got multiple postgrad certifications in and specialist certifications in whole health education, personal training, you're a certified personal trainer, pre and postnatal corrective exercise specialist, and pregnancy health coach. Mm-hmm. Steph is the podcast host. She co-hosts a podcast called Real Food Mamas with a naturopathic physician. Steph co-created a branch of the Whole30 called Healthy Mama, Happy Baby with Melissa Hartwig, which has evolved into Whole Mamas, which you've just launched in the last couple of weeks and which you oversee and manage. Mm-hmm. You are a maternal mental health advocate, postpartum meal delivery coordinator, which I love so much, by the way. You're an active member of the Birth Network of Monterey. You are a marine wife, which is a whole full-time job in and of itself, I imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a women's health enthusiast / geek. Would you say that sums you up fairly?
Yeah. It does. It does. I feel like the majority of my life is being a toddler mom, though. Yeah. That's a full-time job plus.
Just that one, that's 2.5 full-time jobs, right? So
yes. Yeah. Yep. Otto is almost 4 and Leo is almost 2. Okay. So we are in it right now.
A lot of energy in 2 little bodies.
Yeah.
Look, so speaking to our audience here, most of us, maybe all of us, many of us certainly walk this path, functional medicine, health promotion, because of our own experiences, because of either issues that we've had with our own health or because of health of a loved one, a spouse or a family member, a child. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's also true for you, Steph. So correct me if I get any of this wrong, but from my observations from afar, I think you were already interested in and passionate about health. And hormones maybe, and you had some personal struggles in that area that you navigated with food and using kind of health promotion that led you up to becoming pregnant with your first baby. So do you want to fill us in a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. This could be a really long story, so I'll try to give you the highlight points. So I graduated from school as a dietitian. I was actually a vegetarian at the time, doing the low-fat, fat-free stuff, totally bogus when we look at it now, but that's what I was doing. And my eyes became open to the paleo diet, and that's kind of how I started. And this was back in 2008, 2009, before it got really popular. And at that time, the paleo world was pretty much heavily male-dominated. And so when I came out as a dietitian who was a female saying, hey, look, this may not be a bad approach, I got an overwhelming amount of women that were coming to me with wanting to learn how to improve their health or overcome hormonal issues. And so that's really, I mean, I didn't really know where I wanted to specialize after I got out of school. I was just, let's see what happens. And that's what happened, is women started coming to me. And as we were kind of looking under the hood, we did find that there were a lot of underlying hormonal imbalances. Maybe they were suffering or navigating the female athlete triad. I had a lot of these women, paleo and CrossFit were hand in hand. So I had a lot of women who didn't have periods, or were having irregular periods, or they had really low body fat and a lot of stress, and they weren't taking care of themselves really well. So I worked with them, and while I was working with them, my husband deployed. You said that he was a Marine. So while he was deployed, I said, you know what? I'm going to go off the birth control pill. There's no point in me being on the birth control pill. I'm not sold that it's safe. So why not? Went off of it. At the time, I thought my periods and my hormones were fine. Got off the birth control pill, and my period didn't come back. And it didn't come back for a really long time. So here I was thinking I was a very healthy person. I was eating well. At the time, I was eating a paleo diet, including the fats again, including the animal proteins, upping the calories, and my periods were missing. And I went to doctors, and the only thing that doctors told me were, I went to multiple doctors for second and third opinions, and they said, oh, well, do you want to get pregnant? And I was like, no, not right now. And I can't right now. Anyways, my husband's deployed. They're like, well, then it's not a problem. It's not a problem. Just when you want to get pregnant, you might have a little bit of complications, or, maybe just come and talk to us beforehand and we'll help you out. It's no big deal. Don't worry about your missing period. And that didn't sit right with me, right? That was like, no, that's not okay. Why don't you help me? And so I went to go see another person, and their advice to me was, you know what? We just need to up your calories. We need to get you on some like Boost or Ensure shakes, which are highly processed, high calorie shakes. And you know what? You just need to stop exercising. Like, you know what? You'll get your period back once that happens. No, that didn't sit right with me either. And so I figured I had to take this into my own hands. At the time, we didn't have the finances to really go and see somebody in functional medicine and get all the labs done. So I was like, you know what, right now I'm going to do what I know is best, use my training. I don't recommend being your own doctor. I do recommend going to see a functional medicine doctor, but I had a couple of skills and tools that I wanted to try before going that route. And some of the things that I did were I did increase my calories, but not with Boost or Ensure shakes. I did tone down my exercise, but I didn't cut it out completely, because telling somebody that really enjoys fitness to not work out is just horrible advice, right? You just need to change the way that you're working out. I added in some supplements. I did some acupuncture. I did a lot of stress reducing modalities, and it came back. And I didn't have to go on hormones. I didn't have to do anything very intense. Just these lifestyle modifications helped. And I do think that there is a time and a place to use those other, medications or whatever you need to. But, trying to figure out how to get your body healthy before or during those treatments, I think is a really smart move. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. And so I use a lot of those tools that helped me to help the women in my practice. And these women that were dealing with these hormonal issues, they all of a sudden got pregnant, which kind of lent into, okay, well, then I need to figure out this whole pregnancy world, right? Because there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much conflicting information. It's such a vulnerable time. So I became very fascinated with it, and I was helping my clients through that transition. Sure enough, my husband came back from his deployment. I got pregnant. So then I personally got that experience. I got to figure out, this is what these women were going through, and using my personal and professional experiences really helped me create Healthy Mama Happy Baby, and to be able to empathize with what women are going through.
So you're sort of already there, but then your experience with pregnancy and birth and motherhood and the chaotic experience that is, your postpartum experience, I think really profoundly set you on a very specific trajectory. It kind of set you on fire in a good way.
Yeah. So, I had my first pregnancy. It went so well. I mean, I got very, very lucky. I tell people I got lucky during my pregnancy, but my postpartum is where it kind of bit me. Pregnancy was great. Had a home birth, uncomplicated birth. and the baby was born. And the first couple of days were okay. And then I had the baby blues, which 80+% of women do. And then all of a sudden something kind of clicked in me. And I felt very anxious for the first time in my life. I was nervous about my husband leaving the house for an hour. I was very concerned about the health of the baby. I was watching the baby breathe. Every time the baby like had a little sniffle or, you know, it had a breastfeeding complication, it was a very intense anxiety that I felt. And, you know, many parents feel this new parent worry, but mine was to the point where like I would feel my heart starting to beat really fast. And I would go to the worst common scenario and I wouldn't leave the house because what if something happened when I was driving? And it was a very uncomfortable, very hard place, but nobody was talking about it in my world. And I would mention these things to my friends and my family and they're like, oh, but that's just normal. That's just how you feel when you have a new baby. You're just hypervigilant. And so I spent the entire first year not catching it myself, but feeling very alone and feeling very confused why moms were out in the library with their kids, just enjoying it. And I was sitting at home panicking over every little thing. And so finally around a year, I started doing a little bit more research. I had enough of like feeling like, why is this happening every single day? And realized that I was navigating postpartum anxiety and nobody had caught it. I had no idea what was going on, but I had really struggled that first year. And ever since I realized that and I started taking action and talking to a therapist and really building a plan to support me, which I'm going to talk about at the summit, I just have become such an advocate for maternal mental health because I think there are so many women. I mean, right now the statistic is 1 in 5 to 7 women are navigating a perinatal mental health complication or mood and anxiety disorder, meaning they could be experiencing it during pregnancy or after, anytime after. And I am fired up to make sure that women are enjoying their motherhood and know that if they aren't feeling like themselves, that there's no shame in that and that there's so much help that's out there, and really advocating for professionals to screen their clients and to take a vested interest in mom instead of just the baby.
Yeah, I think it's such an important topic. And I think that there are an awful lot of women out there who are like you, kind of undiagnosed, unrecognized, and that there's a lot of stuff that gets dismissed as being normal, and it can be so hard to differentiate because in that postpartum period you are a mess a lot of the time. You know, you haven't slept and you know your nipples are bleeding and you know you haven't had a shower for a couple of days and you're not feeling like your best self in the best case scenario, I think. So I think that's I didn't know the statistic. Did you say it's 1 in 5, 1 in 4, 1 in 5?
1 in 5 to 7 right now. And then we can't forget about partners too. I mean, if mom has a mental health condition, there's a 50% chance that partner will too.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, I, as part of the gestational journey thing, I wrote a piece for, not a piece, but I think for Instagram the other day that was like, why isn't anyone talking about the dudes? You know, we don't talk about the guys when it comes to fertility, and we don't do preconception planning with the guys a lot of the time, and nobody's talking about postpartum mental health for the guys. And to a certain extent, I think if somebody as a mother in that first couple of months after I gave birth, if someone had said to me, yeah, but what about your husband's mental health? I probably who cares about him?
Right. True. It's true. It's true. It's not the mom's responsibility to make sure that her husband is doing okay. I mean, like to a degree, yes. But if you are struggling, you need to work on you. You need to put your own oxygen mask on first. And I think it needs to be something that's very proactive, and dads going into the birth or into the postpartum need to be reminded that like, hey, it's okay to talk about this. And here's a ton of resources. And I'm going to be giving those out to, you know, those that come to the summit. And I also have tons of free resources for dads too, and dads to be, on my podcast, which we actually just rebranded to Whole Mama's Podcast as of today. And and also on my Instagram, I talk about paternal mental health as well. So yeah, I think it's something that like being proactive going into it, because when you are sleep deprived, even if you aren't experiencing a mood or anxiety disorder, it's not the right time to like figure out your game plan, right? There's so many moving parts. So going into it prepared, it's never too late, but it's never too early.
And I think that, you know, the idea of treating the family, making sure that the family unit is okay, like preconception and also postpartum, I think that that's really smart. You know, I working with children, I don't specialize in working with children, but I have found that in my practice, if I'm trying to support a child, it's almost necessary to support the family for the child to get well. And why wouldn't it be any different for any other member of the family?
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Children are impacted too. I actually, you know, it was a very interesting learning experience for me this weekend with my kids. I don't know if you saw me post about this, but I've been under a lot of stress lately with the launch of all of these different things and the rebrands. And I literally came home on a Monday at 4:30 p.m., gave my husband a high five, and then he went to the airport and he went on a business trip. And I came home to like dinner time madness, right? You know what it's like at dinner time. And like just coming off a plane, a 2-hour drive home in traffic. And I felt like this just weight on my shoulder that it felt unbearable. And I'm usually pretty resilient with these things, especially after working so hard on my mental health. But I was shook up, and my kids were a mess, right? And you can tell as a mom when you aren't there and you aren't in it and you are navigating these things, your kids are going to be way more fussy, right? When you have a bad day, your kids feel that energy. And so it's really important, as you mentioned, children. You know, obviously, you know, I love talking about feeding them well and nourishing them with food, but also nourishing them with like positive energy. And this is not to say that you should feel guilty if you're not able to do that, or that their kids are going to be, you know, impacted for the rest of their life, but just kind of understanding that the family dynamic is so important. And if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, right?
Exactly. Happy mama, happy life.
Yeah. Yep.
So then, as well as birthing your children during this time, you have also, you know, you've co-created Healthy Mama, Happy Baby, which has turned into Whole Mamas and the podcast. So can you talk a little bit about how that came about? Where in the timeline was that compared to, for example, your pregnancy with Healthy Mama, Happy Baby? Was that after?
Yep. So I created Healthy Mama, Happy Baby right before Otto turned 1.
Okay.
And so I created that with maybe 5 to 10 hours a week of childcare because I was not ready to put him into full-time daycare, which blows my mind. I mean, you have a plan when you're a mom, and then the world just laughs at you. So I thought for sure I was going to go back to work full-time right away. And I didn't feel ready to put my child back in daycare until a year postpartum. So I just did 5 to 10 hours a week with a nanny around 9 months. And it took forever at that rate. But yeah, we built that after he was born.
And I mean, that has gone, I think, from strength to strength. It's, you've created a very big, very dynamic community. You're serving a lot of women. Can you talk to us a little bit more about how did the idea, I mean, I can appreciate how the idea for that happened, but do you want to talk us through?
Yeah, sure. And there's actually, I just uploaded today a really great podcast with myself and Melissa Hartwig, the co-creator of The Whole 30, about why we created Healthy Mama, Happy Baby, and what Whole Mamas is. So that's like another great hour if you want to listen to that and like her story. But Healthy Mama, Happy Baby was created because Melissa and I are both very well educated in health and wellness. And when we were pregnant, we were just kind of like running around with our heads chopped off. Like, what do we do? Like, we know all this information, but we're scared and we're vulnerable. And like, is this right? Like, how do we find this information? And you doubt yourself so much. I mean, even the most confident women doubt themselves during preconception and pregnancy and postpartum. And during her pregnancy, her son's older than mine. During her pregnancy, she would send me messages like, hey, like, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And I would answer her and I would feel like totally confident. I'm like, oh, this is what you do during pregnancy. But then when it came around for my pregnancy, I was like, what do I do? And I sent her text messages like, what do we do about this? And so we were constantly communicating and helping each other find great resources and support. And we didn't have strong communities of women that were like-minded. And so we relied on each other. So the idea of Healthy Mom and Happy Baby came about because we understand that there are so many women out there that don't have a supportive community of like-minded women that understand some of this functional medicine stuff, or like overall wellness from an alternative or natural perspective. And we wanted to put everything in one place, right? So you're not Googling and trying to search everywhere. So Healthy Mom, Happy Baby, we cover newborn procedures, we cover nutrition, we cover exercise, we cover supplementation, we cover discussions to have with your partner, we cover alignment and sleep and a whole range of topics, so that, not saying that we are like the go-to and the best resource, but we put everything in one package for you. And we pull the best resources and we put them into that package. And then we allow women to kind of dig as deep as they want to. So there's some moms that are out there that are like, okay, just tell me like what supplements to take and I'm good, or just tell me what to eat and I'm good, or tell me what not to do in the gym and I'm good. And then there's moms in our community that are like, show me the research. Show me exactly what you need. Show me where you're finding this information. So we allow for that. And Healthy Mom, Happy Baby gives you the opportunity to dive deeper. And we get a private Facebook community, which it's my favorite place on the internet, to be honest. And it's not just because I created it. The women that are in that community have become like best friends to me. And it's small enough where you get to really know them and you feel like you're their best friend. But at the same time, you have that kind of security where you can share things and you don't feel as vulnerable and raw.
And then the podcast, how did that come about, and how is that, because you've had a couple of changeovers in people on the podcast? And
so we started the podcast, I'm trying to remember, I think it was probably, I'm going to totally slaughter this, I think it was maybe around like 6 months when we created that podcast. So no, I don't know, it was 2015 that we created that podcast. I'm trying to think of how old Otto was. But I just had Otto, and I was kind of feeling that like there's not a whole lot of, this was before podcasts were popular, like 2015 was the very beginning of podcasts. I was like, there's not a whole lot of podcasts out there for moms. What if we just open up our computers, turned on a mic, and just started talking about nutrition for parents and like just random topics? And it started out being myself and another RD who had a son like a week before mine, Aglaé. And we started as a passion project. We're like, okay, we don't have a whole lot of time. We're moms, so let's do it bi-weekly and let's just keep it very casual. And it's just been so much fun. And we've gotten so much great feedback about the podcast that I wanted to take it to the next level. And that's really what we did with Whole Mamas. Aglaé has gone a separate direction in her business. And so I decided to bring on another co-host because, as we all know, there's no one way to parent and to mother. And I wanted to bring in her perspective too, because although we're similar, we have differences as well. And she sees the world. I mean, she had an easy breezy postpartum, and she's like totally loving every bit of motherhood. And I'm kind of like, I'm swimming. I'm like figuring it out. So she's a naturopathic doctor who specializes in pediatrics, and she is amazing. Have you listened to the episodes with her?
Yeah.
Yes, she is so great. She's very empathetic, but she knows so much, and she's able to communicate that knowledge in such a tangible way for people. So she came on the podcast just recently, and we rebranded to Whole Mamas Podcast, and we're going to weekly episodes now, and I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, so lots of exciting stuff going on.
In
your life and in your work, really. So how is your health today? Because, I'm asking specifically because like you, I think it was actually you that said to me, you're postpartum forever, right?
Yeah.
Baby, you are for the rest of your life postpartum, but toddler mum life is really hectic, and toddler working mum life is frankly insanity, speaking from experience. How do you actually prioritize your health or being healthy and balancing that with the needs of work and children? Can you share a mum hack? Could you share a food treat? Can you share a non-food treat? Like, what are your secrets?
Yeah, I love to think of motherhood in general, especially like working mom life in seasons, right? There have been seasons where I felt like everything was running pretty smoothly. Like the kids were sleeping well, the kids weren't picky about eating, and things are kind of flowing. And then there's also season like right now where it's just, there's so much to do and not enough hours. And I'm sure you can all relate to that, right? There's seasons where like you got the terrible twos and then they're pretty good. So we need to kind of think about this whole like balance thing in terms of day to day, right? Every day is going to be so different, but the one thing that you can keep consistent is your nutrition, right? And so with all of this, that is one thing that I haven't let slip is I know that I feel the best and I can be the best me if I eat whole foods and I reduce my sugar, because sugar is such a trigger for me and my anxiety. So I prioritize nutrition, and in times where it's a very busy season, I make it as easy as I can on myself. And that is through my ingredient meals, which I've talked about a couple times on my page. And I'm actually going to be doing a Instagram live today at 2 p.m. Pacific time, which is probably bedtime for people in your area.
That's 10 p.m. for you in the UK, for us in the UK. Yeah.
Okay. But just going over what that means. And so with my, with recipes, I don't really do recipes, funny enough. I make a bunch of proteins. So I will throw some things in like the Instant Pot. Do you use those over? Okay, the Instant Pot and slow cooker. And then I'll use like really fun pre-made condiments from like Primal Kitchens and Tessemae's, and I'll mix and match things. So like, it's so easy once you have things already pre-cooked to put a bed of lettuce together, throw some slow cooker chicken on it, throw some like really high quality ranch dressing that's already made for you, and like a couple of veggies that are already pre-cut, and like you have a meal. Also, it's really been helpful with picky eaters because you know how it is. Sometimes they're like, well, I don't want ranch on mine. I want this. And so like you can kind of navigate once you have things bulk prepared and you can mix and match. You can kind of cater to the picky toddlers a little bit more. So I've been prioritizing my nutrition. I've also been prioritizing my sleep. I am in bed no matter what, even if I have a huge deadline by like 9:30, 10 p.m. That's it, lights out. And I am up around 7. So I try to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And that hasn't always been the case. You know how it is with kids. My first didn't sleep through the night till after a year, which probably contributed to my postpartum anxiety. But sleep has always been important. And then making sure that your workouts are consistent with what's going on in your life. So when you are not sleeping well, when you are highly stressed, this is not the time to be going to your CrossFit class 6 times a week. This is time to be going for walks, doing more yoga classes, doing more therapeutic exercises, so that you are aligning what is going on internally, you know, your stress level with what you're doing on the outside, right? So, you know, we think about stress as like the kids screaming or the boss yelling at us, but stress is also not getting a whole lot of sleep, not eating healthy foods, and over exercising. So those are a couple of things I've been doing: prioritizing sleep, eating well, and moving my body in a therapeutic manner.
Awesome. That's good advice for anybody, actually.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're a high flying professional with no children or, you know, a mom of a couple of toddlers, that's generally health promoting advice.
Yeah.
So if you can reflect back over your time with Whole30 Healthy Mama Happy Baby, what's the biggest thing that you've learned from working with all of the women in that program? You know, is there anything that has surprised you from that community?
Yeah, I think it's all the different ways that you can become a mom. You know, and all the different ways you can become a mom with, you know, foster and adoption, and, you know, how you mom too. Like there's just so many different ways. I think we think that there's one way to mom and there's one way to become a mom. And I have learned so much from those women of like, this is how I do things. And it's opened up my eyes to things that I may not have known. Also learning how to be effective in communicating with women. So for example, there's, you know, if a woman has a cesarean section, for example, a lot of times women will say, well, or if she has a hard birth, like, well, at least your baby's healthy, right? And these things they seem very benign to say, like, well, at least your baby's healthy, but the way that you communicate can be very impactful in a negative way to the mom. So just saying like, well, at least your baby's healthy really dismisses how mom's feeling. I've even learned too over the years that saying like, well, at least your baby's healthy may not be appropriate, because what if the baby isn't healthy? Like that doesn't make the baby less than or the mom less than. Like the mom has this baby and the mom is doing everything that she can in her power to take care of her baby. And so I think being very sensitive to the way that you communicate, whether it's with your friend or your patient or your loved one or people in your community, and just realizing that they have a story. And sometimes if you don't know what to say, it's almost better to just be like, how are you doing? Right? And I've dropped off, you talked about being a meal delivery coordinator. I drop off meals all the time to new moms. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll drop off the meal. I'll ask them if they want me to come in and to be with them, or just drop off the meal. I usually bring a cooler because sometimes mom doesn't want to see anybody and sometimes mom just wants to rest. So if mom does want me to come in and be with her, a lot of times I won't run to the baby right away. I will run to the mom and I will look at her in the eyes and I will say, how are you doing? And I will pause. And I can't tell you how many times I've had moms just cry because nobody has come to them and asked them how they're doing and really given them the time and the space to open up. And that is so powerful, just allowing the mom to feel what she's feeling, because most of the time she's running around with her head cut off, right? But to allow her to just like be with you in that moment and to get those feelings expressed where she may not be able to express them to her partner or to her loved one or to her family, right? Like I know my mom was like, breastfeeding's hard, just give them formula, right? Not the most helpful answer to somebody that's struggling. So I think that's like one of the most powerful gifts that you can give somebody is just being with them.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. And what, you know, my own experience with pregnancy, which is, side note, how the gestational journey was born in the first place, because very similarly to you and birthing Whole 30 Healthy Mama Happy Baby, like I was going through a similar experience here because I've got autoimmune disease. And so I was navigating pregnancy with autoimmunity as an extra layer of complication and couldn't find any resources. I had no answers. And anyway, that's actually a side note. But one of the things that, one of the other things that I couldn't believe when I was pregnant was the astonishing things that people say to pregnant.
Right.
Like the unbelievably inappropriate things that people say to pregnant women or women that have just had a baby.
Yeah.
So I imagine, in fact, one day maybe I'm going to start a website where I'm just collecting the stories. So
oh yeah.
And I probably laugh about it afterwards. Yeah.
Totally. And you know, it's going to happen. Like you're going to have some times where you say something and you're like, oh, that probably wasn't appropriate. We just had a new neighbor move in and she's 34 weeks pregnant with twins. And you can tell she's feeling very uncomfortable right now. And I was asking her like, oh, how are you doing? She's like, oh, like, I'm not doing so well. I was like, oh, you're almost there. And then I stopped myself and I'm like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Right now, you probably want to hit me because every single hour feels like forever for you right now. So it's not that we need to be so hypersensitive, but just like think about things and not barge in there with your personal feelings about their pregnancy or what they should be doing.
Yeah, I was on the, when I was really pregnant with my first baby, I had a complete stranger come up to me on a train and sit down next to me and say, I just wanted to give you the advice that from this moment on, you should not run while you're pregnant. Oh, yeah. Because when I did that, I totally damaged my urinary tract and I've been incontinent since then. And I wish I was like, lady, that's your stuff. Like, you wish someone had told you that. I don't want you to tell me.
Right. Yeah, and it's often the negative things that happen to them, right? Like, and people, I don't know if they just don't want to brag, but they're not like, oh, like I ran 5 miles at that point in my pregnancy. Or like, it's usually they come with you with like the attack or like the things that went wrong for them because that's what they remember. So just keeping that in the back of the mind is like, they're not sharing the good things or you're not hearing the good things. You're just hearing people's negative highlight reel.
Yeah, true story. So I've got some really specific questions for you now, if I may. Yeah. So I know that the Western world is now having babies in their 30s more than their 20s for the first time actually ever, so far as I know. But I personally don't really, and it might be because I'm working in this industry, but I see a lot of struggle, right? There's a lot of struggle with people having issues falling pregnant in the first place, miscarriages, difficult pregnancies. I'm sure that there are a lot of people that aren't having problems as well, but I am hearing from people who are not necessarily in the functional medicine space that that's to be expected because women are having babies in their 30s and in their 40s, and of course it's going to be difficult. But I don't really think that as a single factor actually does account for what I'm seeing. So my actual question is, and aside from social media making it easier for people to share their stories with each other, do you think that we're in trouble in terms of reproduction? Of course, not the people that are working with you, and not the people that are working with Angela, the fertility nutritionist, but in general, I think that this is like autoimmunity. There's actually this kind of growing tide of issues, chronic health issues in this area that are affecting fertility and pregnancy and postpartum health and infant health. So are we in trouble? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I'll start with a positive spin on it. Is I don't think we need to be in trouble, but I think if we continue behaving and adopting some of these lifestyle concerns or considerations, then we could be in trouble. I mean, there's a lot working against us these days when it comes to fertility and overall health than it has in years past, right? We've got more pesticides, and we've got more artificial foods in our diet, and we've got more stress than ever before. And I mean, even the social media, right? Like you talked about that, like being addicted to that and filling our brains with maybe some negative feelings about ourselves and how we don't look like that fitness athlete, and being connected to and exposed to EMFs all day, not shutting down, looking at that blue light at night, eating highly processed inflammatory foods, high sugar foods. Like there's a lot of things that can impact fertility. And a lot of us are engaged, not a lot of us, but those that are dealing with or navigating infertility, there is work to be done. That's for sure, to improve the fertility. I don't think that once you hit 30, all of a sudden you're doomed, right? And that's kind of 35, you're doomed, whatever the case may be. I do not think that is the case. I think what is the case is it could be a cumulative response of so many different environmental factors, so many things thrown at our body that is a stressor that is impacting our fertility. And I feel positively about this topic because I think once you understand that and you take the steps, then it becomes almost a non-issue, right? Like there's going to be cases where they do all of the things and it still doesn't happen, but I don't think it necessarily is something where our society is doomed. We just have to educate ourselves.
Yeah. Because I agree with you that there are a lot of factors involved, and also a lot of those are lifestyle mediated and correctable or reversible maybe. And one of my observations, of course, is that nobody outside of our health space really talks about preparing for pregnancy. Your doctor, even your obstetrician gynecologist, isn't telling you, listen, 4 months before you want to try starting to conceive, you need to start making sure that that egg and that sperm has what it needs to mature in a healthy way, and et cetera. But okay.
Yeah, you bet. I think if you work with a functional medicine doctor, they will totally understand these things, right? They will look under the hood and make sure you are your best self before conceiving. And I mean, I guess the biggest benefit I see is like when you do these things, when you look at your personal care products and look at the food that you're eating and what you're thinking and your environmental influence, you are not only setting your body up to be optimally healthier so you can conceive, but chances are you're going to have a smoother pregnancy and postpartum. So if we can look at it in the sense of like, it's not just like how quickly can I get pregnant, but how healthy can I be before I get pregnant?
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of the time medically, pregnancy is considered basically two things. Number one, do you fall pregnant? At all? How fast can you fall pregnant? Can we just get you pregnant? And then once you're pregnant, can you continue the pregnancy to a live birth? You know,
Yeah.
but actually there's so much more that should be going into the thinking, because you don't just want to be able to get pregnant and have a baby. You want to be happy and healthy and have a happy, healthy baby. The goal is not really just to have a child, it's to have a good experience, you know, as good a health, you want to have a healthy child, actually, I think, you know, and a happy child, and you don't want to be falling apart at the seams while all of that's going on.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you about something that's maybe a little bit controversial.
I'm all about it.
Awesome. It's really interesting to me. I'm really fascinated about this. And it's not actually being talked about particularly here in the UK at the moment. But that is the use of CBD oil in pregnancy and also in children. Now, with the caveat, of course, that you're not a physician. Could you please share with us some of the facts that you know about this subject and your opinions? What do you think?
Yeah. So I haven't done a ton of research into it, and it's partly because there isn't research in pregnancy and postpartum and breastfeeding. So the research is outside of that population, and it's still a very emerging field. But we interviewed Dr. Jess, who works in San Diego in California here in the States, on our podcast, and she had some really interesting things to say about it. I think CBD oil isn't something where, okay, I'm dealing with morning sickness, or I'm dealing with pain, or I'm dealing with anxiety, or I'm dealing with depression, that I'm gonna just turn to CBD oil. I think it's something that you can think about and work with a practitioner in and keep in your back pocket if some of these other things don't work, right? Because we don't wanna be using CBD oil to therapeutically treat something or put a Band-Aid on something. We wanna be understanding, like, well, why is this happening? And then if we need to, use that modality. So I have seen it work effectively in some women who are navigating morning sickness, or especially HG, hyperemesis gravidarum. You know, some women that have HG will resort to actually using the THC component of it as well.
Smoking weed for
yes.
edibles if you're in California. But, yeah.
Right. Yes, but that's not without risks, and most providers will caution against that, right? Because it could potentially lead to preterm birth or low birth weight or complications with motor function. It's just not studied. We just don't know for sure. But there are some practitioners out there that are very open-minded to it, that think, well, we don't know the side effects of medication that are given to these women, you know, for Zofran, or, you know, medications for severe nausea. So could that be a substitute, especially if it's given without the THC component? So there's a lot of theory about that. And again, I'm not prescribing or saying that you should be doing this, but there's a lot of interesting, you know, schools of thought around it right now. With breastfeeding, Dr. Jess was talking about in the episode that it shouldn't affect a breastfeeding infant, especially if it's a modest amount is used, and just, like I said, microdosing therapeutically as needed. If a mom is feeling anxiety or depression, I have seen it work very well in some women that were dealing with postpartum mood and anxiety disorders that weren't breastfeeding, that took it just therapeutically for themselves. And this is, you know, one of the women that I worked with that decided to use it, she got approval from her provider, and she was 4 years postpartum, and she was navigating mood and anxiety issues for a really long time. And she noticed really significant improvements with it. And it was very clear to her because she had been struggling for over 4 years. So I think there are some really interesting thoughts behind it. But of course, you want to work with a practitioner that knows about it. You want to choose an organic source. You want to choose a quality source. And then you want to be mindful of, does it contain THC, and is that appropriate for your context?
Awesome. So I am looking forward to learning more about that as the research comes out, and you know, as the ball rolls a little bit further down in that field. Because I think it's super interesting, and I think it's really interesting anyway. You know, the applications with regards to pain, and you know, all of the different pathways that it works on as a phytonutrient. And it hadn't occurred to me, I guess, for no good reason, that it might be applicable for pregnancy or in breastfeeding or postpartum. So I actually had hyperemesis with my first pregnancy, and it is the most miserable I've ever been in my entire life. Like, I can't quite believe I survived that, to be honest with you. Look back on it in hindsight, I was desperate. I did not smoke any weed, but I probably would have if someone had handed me a joint and said, that's just not my it's not my cup of tea in general, but I was desperate and probably would have tried anything if someone had told me that it was helpful at that point. So I'm excited that there might be an application for that in that space.
Yeah. And it's tricky though. I mean, it is tricky because let's say a mom does use that during her pregnancy, but then, it's still in her bloodstream, or she tests positive for it once baby is born. Like, that could have really significant ramifications. So nothing is without complications or potential pros and cons. But like you were saying, like, if you are really struggling in that moment, like, it may be worth talking to your provider about, and like getting a note or figuring out an option that can work for you.
Do they drug test mothers?
I mean, if there's signs and if there's like concerns, yes, but no, it's not like every baby gets that, or every mom gets that.
Vitamin K shot and a drug test.
No.
The US and the UK are really different when it comes to the approach to medical care during pregnancy and medical care in the postpartum period. So, it's actually really been fascinating to me when I was, so my stepsister is a physician in the US, and we were pregnant at the same time, and I couldn't believe how different the approaches were. Like, I barely saw anybody for my whole pregnancy. You sort of you have 2 scans and a few appointments, and then I had a healthcare worker that came out to the house like twice after the baby was born, and that was it. Nobody, like, after the initial things to make sure that the baby was weighed, etc. Nobody. I was fine. Like, I didn't have problems, and so they were like, "Oh, you're fine. See ya."
Yeah. And it's so different here, even from provider to provider. Like, if you go to an OB/GYN or if you go to a midwife, like, they have scheduled appointments that's within their scope. But there's a couple times with my midwife, I did. Both of them were home births, and the midwife's like, towards the end, she's like, "How are you feeling? Like, do you want me to come or do you not want me to come?" And I could tell her, like, "No, I'm feeling fine." So it so depends on the provider.
So the next question is, what are your thoughts on mums and alcohol? So I'm asking you this question because I want to hear your thoughts on it, because I think you're very balanced in your advice. But I want to know what you think about the whole wine o'clock, drinking while breastfeeding. I wrote a blog about this because I wrote an Instagram post, and people were very interested in this topic. And again, it's one of those things that's not really talked about, but it should be. I think the stance that I take is, I get it. I understand like the joke, and I understand that it can be fun and silly, and I've said it too many times. But as I'm learning, I think, as you develop a little bit more sensitivity to these topics, and you hear stories from other moms, you realize that joke isn't all that funny, and it can be potentially harmful. And in fact, it is becoming a public health concern, where more and more women are drinking, more and more moms are resorting to alcoholic beverages in an amount that is harmful to their body, right? There's a difference between having a glass of wine with your partner on date night because you enjoy that wine, and coping with alcohol, right? And having it nightly. So when we say these things, we just have to take into consideration that there are some people that are really navigating alcoholism. They have family members that have navigated alcoholism. They feel that it starts to become a part of motherhood and normalize is like, it's okay. And that's not what I'm okay with. Like, I don't want it to become a point where it's bedtime and you open up that glass of wine because that is how you cope with all the stressors throughout the day. There's so many other ways to cope. And if you're out there and you feel like, you're joking about this all the time, it may be worth really considering if that's the right thing to do, or choosing specifically who you say that to. Like, if you have a good friend, like if I know like you have no problem with alcoholism, you don't have a family history, like we can kind of joke about it. That's one thing, but like posting it to Instagram where people can really be impacted and it may be very insensitive, not appropriate. do you think it needs to be part of the postpartum maternal health conversation? No,
Yes.
mental health conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Anytime we are using a substance to kind of heal what's going on, that is not appropriate, right? And that is definitely a coping skill. You know, sometimes for people it's food, sometimes for people it is alcohol or gambling or online shopping. No matter what it is, if you're having to rely on something to help you internalize what's going on, it's not navigating your mental health appropriately, and it's worth working with somebody. In the blog post that is coming out, I think this week, it talks about all the different organizations that are doing really great things that you can reach out to outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. And yeah, if you feel like if you are using it inappropriately, and you may be able to just like change that yourself, but if you're not, there are organizations out there that can help you.
Awesome. So then lastly, what do you have coming up? Do you have any sneak peeks into future projects for us? You mentioned to me, actually, I asked you if you could talk to us a little bit about the Bible that you've written.
I don't know if it's a Bible, but
and my last question is, do you have a really big dream that you're working towards? Like what's on the horizon?
Oh, you have such great questions. So the next project that's going to be coming out is something that I've been working on for nearly a year. And that's because I've had limited daycare and a lot of other things going on, but it is a really significant project. And that is, so when you're pregnant, I don't know if you signed up for these things, but like what to expect in the bump.com and like those weekly pregnancy emails that talk about like what you're experiencing and what baby's experiencing, and then like give you a couple tips and tricks. So I wanted to create my own because I didn't love the ones that were sent. And I wanted to make it a little bit more fun and a little bit more relatable and a little bit more personal. So I created from week 3 to week 42 of a pregnancy, you'll be sent an email with what is going on with you and like a conversational tone, like just me talking to you, what's going on with your baby. It's Whole30. It's from like a Whole30 perspective. So it's not like we want you to Whole30 throughout your pregnancy, but like we do some fun things. Like, do you know about collagen peptides?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So like, instead of comparing your baby to like an apple, where like your baby is the size of this container of collagen peptides, and it's just like really goofy stuff. Like I think later on it's like your baby's the size of like a side of wild sockeye salmon. And so like, it's really fun. And then each week, so it's nutrition based. So each week, like for example, in the beginning, you know, we know that folate is so important. So we talk about where you can get folate. We have a recipe that has a lot of leafy greens in it. We talk about the difference between folic acid and methylfolate. And so it's very nutrition oriented in a way that people can understand. And then we also link to more science related articles and things like that for people that want to dive deeper. And it's really pretty. Like we had our designer work on it and it's really pretty. So, you know, I like to just opening them to see the email. I mean, just like the feel of it is just so beautiful. So that will be launching in October, and that comes free with membership to our Healthy Mama Happy Baby program. And then you can purchase it a la carte on the side. I think it's like $10 or $15 for all of those weeks.
Wow, that's exciting, because I did sign up to what to expect when you're expecting, and I looked forward so much every week to that email that told me what size piece of fruit my baby was. Pregnancy. For the second pregnancy, I was like, where am I? What day is this?
I know, me too.
How many weeks pregnant am I? What trimester is it? But the first pregnancy, I was right there. But I really hated a lot of the advice. I found it really outdated. I found it really old-fashioned. I found it really narrow-minded. And it didn't really resonate with how I live my life. So that's really, really exciting.
Yeah, and what we try to do is, like, you know, the week that you will be offered a flu shot or, you know, a vaccination, we aren't saying you should get it or you shouldn't get it. We're saying this is what you're going to be offered. Here are the reasons why you may want to get it. Here are the reasons why you may not want to get it. And then go ahead, you decide, Mama. You know what feels best for you. We are not here to say, like, this is how you do pregnancy.
Yeah, which is also really important, because a lot of the information that you get is very far in one direction or the other. So it's really difficult to navigate, especially because you are so emotional and at every stage of your pregnancy, trying to make the best decision that you can with limited information. That's great.
Right, right. And then we have mental health check-ins throughout the pregnancy. Like, how are you feeling? Are you experiencing these symptoms? If you are, definitely reach out, because we know that these mental health, like the anxiety and the OCD and the depression, they don't always just start when your baby's born. They can be during pregnancy. So we do these like little check-ins too to make sure moms are doing okay.
Oh, fantastic. And then are you going to follow that up with, so what to expect when you're expecting? They still have my eldest daughter's data in there, and they have updated it. So she's now 2 months away from turning 3. And when I open it up, which I do very infrequently, but it's still there, like it's updated. So are you going to continue that through month by month?
Oh my gosh. Are you adding another project for me? No, I mean, I would love that. I would love that. But our next program actually is going to be on postpartum health for moms, and we are going to incorporate a lot of the mental health component that's out there and how you can use food to help really heal your body. And of course, it's not just about food. We're going to be talking about the different behavioral models that you can use and different supplements, and like where to get help from providers, and like what to do in terms of crisis. We are not pretending to be psychiatrists or psychologists, but like, hey, here are some other tools while you are working with a professional, because so much that's out there, and you can probably appreciate this is like baby focus, like, oh, what to feed your baby and what to do when your baby cries and colic, and that's great. But that also comes at the expense of like, okay, but how are you doing, mom? And what are you doing to take care of yourself? And like, what realistic, super simple things like those ingredient meals can we do to make sure you are in good health?
So that is a fantastic lead into my close, which is, that Steph is one of the group of world-class speakers that we've pulled together for the Gestational Journey Summit. And she's going to be taking us really on a very deep dive into postpartum mental health, postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, and talking about how do you recognize it, how do you prevent it, and how do you support mum through that. And I've had a little sneak peek of your presentation, and I'm just so excited. We do still have some tickets left. I think you'll be kicking yourself if you miss it. And I do know that it's going to sell out. So snap up your ticket if you haven't booked it yet. Listen, thanks so much, Steph. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
It's been fun hanging out with you. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you in person very, very soon.
Yeah, same. I've never been to London, so I'm excited to see your side of the world.
Awesome.
All right.
So just before we finish, does anybody, do any of the participants have any questions for Steph? Just checking the chat, but I think that, oh, there it is.
I don't see any right now.
No. Okay, so I feel like we must have answered everybody's questions.
Yeah. Or they're all sleeping, sorry. Yeah. But I'm always available. I mean, if they have questions, they can contact me on Instagram at Steph Greunke or email stephanie@whole30.com.
Awesome. And I might post some of the links to your podcast and the specific episode on CBD oil with Dr. Jess and anything else that we've kind of talked about today. So
that'd be great. Yeah, I have one on paternal mental health too. That would be good.
Oh, and also the one that you did with Melissa recently on the birth of.
Yeah, that came out today, this morning.
Okay, cool. So more to do, more to listen to.
Yeah, while you're on your walk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Or making your healthy dinner.
Your sweet potato with your baby.
Oh my gosh, yes, I know. I'm like, that's so embarrassing, but I'm totally sharing that.
That's not the half of it, I don't think, in new motherhood. All right, thanks everybody for listening at home. I hope you've enjoyed that for everybody that's watching the replay video, and we look forward to seeing you in October and online. Thanks so much again, Steph.
All right, bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.